everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Light After Trauma. I am your host, Alyssa Scolari, and we are here today to talk about a rather sensitive and difficult topic, I would say. And we are here with Brian Catton. So I do believe this is Brian's first time on a podcast. I met Brian. What'd you say?
In a while.
In a while. Oh, so you've been on a podcast before?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the first time he's been on in a while. And I do believe this is the first time you're on talking about this subject, right?
Yes, that is correct.
So Brian is a friend of mine and my husband's. I met Brian through my husband. And
you guys,
I know, I hate COVID. We miss you too.
I know. Like,
it sucks. It really sucks. But yeah, so Brian and I have kept in touch on the internet because he is honestly just like social justice warrior, and Brian does a lot of work and a lot of awareness on autism, which is not going to be the topic today, although I would love to have him back on to talk about autism because he does a fantastic job just supporting and spreading awareness. But I digress. The topic that we are here to talk about today is purity culture and the Church 2 movement. So we are here to spread some awareness and shed light on the sexual abuse that is happening in churches, and not just sexual, but also psychological and emotional abuse that is happening in church. And, I just want to preface this conversation, and we'll come back to this a couple of times, by saying that the goal of this episode is not to denounce any type of religion or Christianity, right? We are not here to say you should not believe in God because of the abuse that happens in churches. We are here spreading awareness and taking shame and talking about the idea that changes need to happen within the church, not that we need to turn away from the church. So with that being said, hello, Brian. Happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday to you too. I forget what national day it is today, but again,
every day is national something.
Indeed.
So the first question I have for you is, what is the Church 2 movement and what is purity culture?
Sure. So let me start with answering the purity culture thing to the best of my recollection. Let me also just kind of give a little bit of background about my Christian journey that I came to Christ in 2004. So this is right around the height of, this is after the True Love Waits movement that took place in purity culture and promoting and emphasizing sexual abstinence and promoting a high standard of sexual ethic. Nothing wrong with that. There is biblical precedence that we must maintain a high sexual ethic. The issue with purity culture is that it's done in a very legalistic framework where that it's done in specific doctrine of man ways that may present itself like you can't hold hands when you're doing it. You can't kiss. You have to pursue biblical courtship. Like you may know about Josh Harris's books, like with I Kiss Saying Goodbye. I mean, that's one of the big examples with that. And then Elizabeth Elliot's Passion and Purity. And there are some others that talked about denouncing dating in the sense that dating is just, hey, have at it. It's all fun and games. And while there is an appropriateness as far as saying, hey, let's be intentional about dating, the way how purity culture did it was that they set up barriers, not even guardrails, but basically you can't hold hands, you can't kiss, you can't hang out at night. You can't watch Netflix together because someone wants a raging or whatever the excuse may be. And, you need to guard each other's hearts. And you hear that type of language. And the thing is that with purity culture, that's talked about it in such a way that the fine print with that is or else. So, for example, the or else may be, or else you may get kicked out of the church, or else you're basically deflowering your girlfriend or your boyfriend. Essentially translating it in a dehumanizing way of saying, or else you're beyond the reach of God's grace and you're pretty much worthless. And so
even the word deflowering, like, it's icky. It makes me feel
it
so
is.
icky.
Welcome to spring too. But I mean, and the way how it's set up is more than just the dating scene. You may talk like with modesty, and especially with women talking about the idea of 1 Timothy 2, that you have to dress yourself in a certain way in order to make sure that your brother in Christ doesn't stumble, when there's no talk about, hey, even if that is true, shouldn't we address the main issue, which is that for the guys, you need to watch yourselves too. It's shifting responsibility away from the guys over to the girls, in the sense of like with modesty and with clothing. And the way how it unpacks itself is multi-layered, as I've been figuring out. So, I mean, it could be dating. It could be the way how you dress. It could even be in the sense of like with gender and sexual identity. If you even have an inkling of flirting with the idea of coming out, then forget it. You're beyond help.
It takes all of the blame and it shifts it onto all of those reasons, right? The way you were dressed, because
you can't feel this way. You can't process things this way. You must think about it in these black and white terms, that there's no room for ambiguity, no room for gray, no room for doubt, no room for questions, no room for having meaningful dialogue, which then, because it's framed in that binary way of black and white, that basically, if it's the wrong answer, then forget it. You could be shunned. You could be forced out of church. You're basically silenced. And that's happened too many times. Now, with the Church 2 movement that spawned shortly after the Me Too movement, which I applaud everyone who has come forward and said, this happened to me, this is wrong, we need to change it. I applaud them with that. And Church 2 is similar to that, except it's taking on all of those sexual ethics within the church along with it. So you hear cases of, like, there was one book I finished where it talked about how there was a woman who, when she was in her teens, her abuser groomed her and then ended up raping her. And basically she was forced to forgive him, which is another thing. Villainized. Yeah. Tell me that's not fucked up, right?
Oh, it fucking kills me. It kills me.
I know. Which,
just
I mean,
forgive him.
Exactly. It's just no. And it basically, with the Church 2 movement, it's saying we're done with victims having to be villainized and with the villains having to be victimized. We see it with the church, we see it within politics, we see it within celebrities, but with Church 2, we're confining it specifically within the context of the evangelicals, within the sexual ethics in the church, and its importance to make sure that reputation is upheld at any and all costs, even if it means that we have to bulldoze over the trauma that victims have experienced. We have to maintain its prestige no matter what.
And that's what it is. It's so much about self-preservation.
It is.
I love what you said about we need to stop villainizing the victims.
Yep.
and victimizing the villains, which we do in all of rape, sexual assault. We do that all the time. But when it comes to the church, we really lay it on thick because of that desire to have this like self-preservation, because we need everything to look honky-dory.
We have to whitewash the walls, double meaning implied, by the way.
Yes.
And I mean, there was that report that came out about how less than half of Americans are now identifying as regular church attendees, which, I mean, I don't want to celebrate that, because what do you expect? I mean, it's almost like this. Say if you and David were to stay in your house, you had some people over, and you're watching your dogs too, by the way. Sidebar, I miss them too.
They're so big.
Like, I know. I mean, I've seen pictures on the socials, but anyway, I know. Once COVID hits, we're getting our backyard fixed, and so.
Oh, good, and then we can see the
baby. Yes, you can see the little toddler. He's getting so big and squishy too. Anyway.
Oh, your baby's so cute. He's so cute. Anyway, we digress.
Yes, indeed. So, I mean, think about this. If you were to live in a house and you had someone inspect it and tell you that there was black mold, there was termites, there was water damage, wouldn't the common sense solution be, we need to get everyone out of here. We need to make sure that this is fixed and make sure that it's habitable again. Once it is, then we can return and we can carry on, right? Nope.
That would make sense, but not in church.
Not in church. Nope. Out comes the paint. We need to paint over that, because if we find out about it, then no one's going to want to stay with us. And the irony of it all is that if we use that house illustration, it's almost like if you were to look at your neighbor's house and say, well, wait a minute, their front door isn't painted well, or their siding is all messed up, or, well, their driveway is cracked or something like that. That it basically, oh, well, because something else is wrong with them, then that frees us from having to take any responsibility on our end to make sure that we maintain safety within our neighborhood. No. Does that make sense?
So what you're saying, just to make sure I understand that correctly, what you're saying is that we tend to shift blame when we see that there are cracks in the foundation in someone else's life. That's sort of like the scapegoat for churches, to shift blame onto that person. Almost.
I leave foundation out because the foundation is Jesus Christ first and foremost. No other foundation can be laid other than that which is Jesus Christ, which is why I'm focusing more on everything above the foundation. So like the water damage, the black mold, the pesticides, termites.
Any kind of imperfection.
As long as we can identify it outside of the church and demonize and dehumanize that, then that frees us from having to change anything on our end.
Right, no, because it's like it's the church isn't the problem, you're the problem.
Exactly. And that's pretty much the way, I mean, with many church issues, but within purity culture, that's the way how it is. That basically it's almost like everyone is on a sin hunt. That basically, if there's any imperfection with the way how you date, or with how you dress, or with how you identify yourself from a gender standpoint or from a sexual standpoint, we are going to exploit that, because then that makes us the moral vanguards, and that makes us the faithful witnesses of what Christianity is like, when in reality, no, it doesn't.
So in a way, and this is what you're saying is really kind of tying both purity culture and sexual abuse in the church together for me in my brain. In a way, it's like purity culture paves the way for churches to blame others, blame the other when sexual abuse happens, or any kind of abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse.
It's rape culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm hearing. It's like, ugh, icky. That's the only word I have. I'm like, ooh.
And yes, and here's the other thing that I found. Here's the other thing I'm coming to realize. It's very interesting, like with purity culture and with like sexual ethics, like they have the sex talks about, just making sure that you guard your heart, keep yourself pure. I mean, that's fine and all, but there's no counterbalance to it. There's no discussion about what to do in cases of rape. There's no talks about the other C word, consent.
Mm-hmm.
There's none of that happening. And in fact, one of the things I've been pushing my youth pastor to do is, hey, we need to talk about rape. We need to talk about consent, not to say it's acceptable. We hate it, but we need to basically say rape is wrong. Consent is mandatory. Anything short of a yes means no. No further questions. Hard stop. Remove any ambiguity in that response. And purity culture doesn't talk about rape or consent.
Not at all. Right. They pretend like it doesn't exist.
And hence, purity culture leads to a church's version of rape culture.
Yeah. Yeah. So we know why purity culture is so damaging.
Mm-hmm.
And we understand, like, I understand more about the Church Too movement. How did you become so passionate about this? Because this is something you're really, really, really passionate about.
Oh. Story time.
You also don't have to answer that question if you don't want to.
No, I
People
want
don't have to answer my questions.
I want to because, again, as far as raising awareness, if I don't tell the truth about what happened to me, not to say that it's all dependent upon me, but if I don't tell the truth about what happened to me, that may not encourage others to come forward and share their stories as well and to remain in silence. The issue is with remaining silent about it. So, as far as my story goes, there was no sexual abuse that happened to me per se, which is one of the reasons why I was initially hesitant upon it. But nevertheless, as you affirm, and as I affirm, abuse is still abuse no matter what shape, size, color it takes.
Yes. And you talking about this, even though it's not sexual abuse, is all the more important.
Right.
Because you're giving a voice to all of the other people who are in that ambiguity going, well, it wasn't sexual abuse, so does it count? You're here being like, hell yes, it counts.
Fuck yeah, it counts. So,
yeah.
My story. So, again, I became a Christian in 2004. Started finding out more about the Josh Harris book, so I just came to buy him Boy Meets Girl back then act. But I mean, since 2019, Josh has come forward and says that he basically terminated all publishing deals of his books. So no more of his books are being published. He recants his teaching. So, and he has taken ownership of that, but still the damage has been done. That said, so one of the books I picked up talked about courtship, which I mean, I thought, well, okay, I want to please and honor God. This seems to be the way to do it. There's a little bit of legalism in that language. Yeah, you better believe it. And here's the other thing that's insightful about this too. You hear a little bit about prosperity gospel, that if you do these things, if you court the right way, then God's going to bless your marriage. You're going to have the best sex life ever. Yeah, which is just wow. Like that type of language. But back then, I mean, I was still a fairly new Christian as far as like the conduct aspect is concerned. And so I thought, okay, yeah, cool. I'm in. I'm buying this. Not beyond the book. I mean, I thought, okay, this is great. So there was a church I attended during my winter, fall, spring, summer breaks. And so there was a guy who I was attracted to, and I found out that she was the admin assistant. That had nothing to do with it. but I mean, I found her, well, I'll just say it, physically attractive. I found her conduct attractive. I found a lot of things uniquely attractive about her. And I thought, oh, okay, well, let me pray about it. And yeah, the time we used to pray about it, which is so trite. But I mean, I did. And so I ended up talking with the pastorby. I ended up talking with her dad about it. And again, this is purity culture that basically you have no free thoughts, or very little, if any, that things have to be done under the submission of the other S word, of like pastors and friends, because they're there to protect you. You need accountability because make sure that we protect you from sin. And so I ended up having a DTR talk, and things were great, except a few months later found out that her dad was calling an affair. And so, I mean, despite that, I still stayed with her, because, I mean, anything like that is finding out about like your own parents being caught in something that controversial is like, okay, let me bear with you with this. Let me guide you with this. And this is all before the days of Instagram, FaceTime, Zoom, all that good stuff. So sticking with Facebook and emails and texting before unlimited texting. Verizon, I hate you with all my heart. But I mean, things progress from there. And then having some more talks with her mom, because things had to be done under her watch and with her permission as well, which, okay, fine, whatever. I'll do it because, I want to please God. I want to protect her and everything like that. We didn't even hold hands. And what was it? This was in P2 year of pharmacy school. So P3 year, came back for fall break. I told her I love her, and I meant it too. And I mean, things started to, blossom. But I mean, there was no physical, there was nothing controversially physical except for these times when we would cuddle. Shaw.
No cuddling.
But it's just like, okay, come on. Like, I'm able to think for myself and know, like, okay, when it is too much, I'm able to advocate for myself in that regard. But also, one of her friends he would come down through Winchester, Virginia, where he went to college, and he would talk about, you need to be stable, you need to be a man, you need to be a source of stability for her. And I'm thinking, well, fuck, I can't do that even if I tried. I mean, forget the fact that I'm in pharmacy school, forget the fact that I have autism, forget the fact that I'm trying to do my best with everything. It's just, man, if I can't take care of myself, how much less can I take care of her? And I mean, it was depressing. And I mean, again, that's where the toxic masculinity within purity culture takes place. That really? Do I have to? I want to, but is it required of me? What's the or else part? But yeah, so things progressed along swimmingly well, and then I basically got chastised because I ended up telling him that, I told her that I love her. And he's like, you what? And it's just like, dude, it's dating. Like, really? Let alone the fact that she couldn't come down, she couldn't make a weekend trip to be my +1 at some weddings, let alone the fact that she would seldom visit unless if it was with one of her close friends. So hindsight, it was just, okay, I'm doing all these things for you, but I don't feel like that there's any reciprocation. Oh, well, you're being selfish. Why? I mean, am I not allowed to say, hey, I would love it if you could come down here, but her parents prohibited it for whatever bullshit reason. January came along, and the pastor basically hit the e-brake and basically said, listen, you guys really need to slow the pace down. And you really need
Good Lord.
Right? And I'm just thinking like, whoa, like
we're already at a snail's pace, buddy.
yeah. Well, because I said I love her and the fact that, emotions get entangled so much that it's like you're flying a kite and that, if a huge gust of wind blows and then it plummets and then the kite breaks and there's no hope of redemption beyond this. Really? Yeah. Way to go teaching God's sovereignty and that God does cause all things, including emotions possibly running wild to happen for our good and learning from our mistakes. Anyway, so things kind of kind of opened the door for that nosedive because it was just, okay, this is really hard for me because it's P3 year of my spring semester. I took pharmacy law, gag. I was getting ready for my clinical rotations and I just felt like I wasn't receiving reciprocated support, let alone the fact that I couldn't talk with other gals within my church, let alone within my own school. I mean, I did. Don't tell anyone.
That'll be a secret.
Well, too late. It's already on the interwebs. But yeah, so I ended up just kind of sharing my frustrations with her mom and everything like that. And then she withdrew support for us. That was her final straw. And then Easter Sunday night, I was driving back from visiting my parents because I was in Virginia. My parents were in New Jersey at the time. We met halfway. And then basically my, then girlfriend told me that we really need to pray about this. And I could tell from the tone of her voice that she was shook. And she basically, my mom just word vomited on me and I pretty much went ape shit for about less than 24 hours, shall I say. But it was just like, wait a minute. So I'm not, and also, by the way, I was having any doubt, which you cannot have any sort of doubt whatsoever. No questions. So it was tough maintaining that facade. And I just said, you know what? Fuck it. And I broke up with her. And the funny thing is that after I told her, and as I was walking back in and getting ready to study for one of my therapeutics classes, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I felt, free. I was just,
You broke free from that like purity culture and like the gaslighting and
in some sense, yes. I mean, that's the biggest one that I broke free from. And I mean, of course, with any sort of breakup, it's hard. And I did check up with her. I did own up to some things that I did wrong. And then basically a week later, I checked in. Hey, how are you doing? And essentially, she just, in a few short words, in a biblical sense, she told me to fuck off. And then her pastor came in and said, well, actually, you need to write a letter of apology outlining what you did wrong and how the relationship, in a sense, was successful. And it's just like, just insert I can't even.
Right. That's such an abuse of power.
Right. And it's just like, well, fine, I'll do it. And the thing is that still, to this day, there has been no mutually reciprocated apology from her to me. Her husband reached out and basically said, I'm sorry, but you need to do better, which, listen, buddy, my issue isn't with you. It's with your now wife. And this has still remained silent for over a decade. And part of the reason why I became so passionate about it is just that, okay, Yeah, so purity culture in church too isn't like, it's one of those, wow, okay, so it's not just a sexual abuse. It certainly entails that, but there's so much more to it. It's the gaslighting, it's the mental abuse. And
Right. The psychological manipulation of parents coming into the relationship and telling you who you are is not good enough, and that they preyed on it, and that they have the message that you're not good enough. Like that wears on you.
it did. Like, it was to the point where, I mean, I wasn't suicidal, thank God, but it was almost like I need professional help. And that was
Yeah.
even prevented. I felt shamed for admitting that I need professional help. No, you don't. You just need to pray more. Really?
No.
And I mean, even in pharmacy school, like, ironically enough, here's the irony of all of this within purity culture. I was antidepressants. I was anti psychiatric care and everything like that. Yeah. And now just realizing, okay, one of the big things I learned in clinical rotations is to view the patient as a whole. Don't view the part as the whole. I mean, the sum of the parts does make the whole, but like when it comes to like with mental issues, that's a big, I mean, that is a part of them, but it's not the entirety of it, if it makes any sense. Like,
Yeah.
so it's just, people aren't just one thing. There's multiple dimensions of who people are. And with purity culture, it packages it in a nice, easy to understand and apply and to respond.
Right. Very black and white, when humans are anything but in the black and white area. So
Yeah, absolutely.
now, what would you recommend? Right, your story is one of just like intense and chronic, like psychological manipulation and abuse as a result of purity culture, which leaves you feeling just it's a mind fuck. I can't think of any other way to put it. It's an absolute mind fuck. What do you recommend to somebody who might be listening right now who is feeling like, hey, I think I'm kind of caught up in this, or is going, oh, I was caught up in this at one point in my life. Like, how do people, and maybe not what they can do as in how, like physically within their church, but how do they hold on to the faith in Jesus or whatever their religion may be, while also acknowledging that bad things came as a result?
First and foremost, I'm going to affirm this with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength. What happened to you is absolutely not your fault. You need to believe that with every single ounce, as hard as that is. What happened to you is not your fault. And that's what's painful about it. It's that, well, if I didn't listen, it's not your fault. Yeah, but if I did, no. I get that.
It's not your fault. Yeah.
I realize that there were situations that happened, but you're not responsible for the way how they chose to prey on you. The shame isn't yours. It's theirs that they have to take. They're the ones who have to take ownership of. And if they even are a decent human being, let alone a Christian, they should be willing to apologize for that and leave the decision of extending forgiveness up to you. That said, that applies for any human being, irrespective of any religion.
Right.
Because, like it or not, no matter, and yeah, you've seen my post, that no matter what your gender and or sexual identity is, no matter what your race is, no matter what your religion is, all human beings are created in the image of God. And because of that, every single human being has God bestowed dignity, honor, worth, value, and respect. And for Christ's sake, and I mean that with sincerity, for Christ's sake, hold on to that, even if your strength is fleeting. hold on to that you are valuable because you bear God's image. And that is something that no matter what sort of abuse that you experience, that is something that will never be taken away from you. Now, as far as the practical stuff goes, if you're in imminent danger, report it to local law authorities right away. Actually, I would say report it to local law enforcement first, whether it was rape or not, whether you're experiencing domestic abuse, whether you're experiencing physical abuse. If you're on a college campus, let the health center know. They have crisis centers. They should have crisis centers available. I mean, it's been years, but assuming so. Now, if someone you know is a minor, there are states like Pennsylvania that mandates pastors and clergy as mandatory child abuse reporters.
And New Jersey. Yep, New Jersey too.
Excellent. Thank you, Act 31 for PA. I don't know what it is in New Jersey, but if it is, shout it out.
No clue.
Okay. Now, so that said, I say report it first and then report it to pastors. And the thing is that also you must, and I realize that what I'm about to say is traumatic. So find someone who's going to believe you. And I realize that language, it does bring up the same language like with Brett Kavanaugh, Christy Blasey Ford. I believe you trending. I believe you doesn't mean that I believe everything that you say 100% and throw any sort of logic out of the way. No. If someone told you that your house is on fire, I believe you. Let's go back and let's take a look and see if it really is on fire. And if so, let's make sure that we get the house extinguished. Let's make sure that everyone is safe. That's right, all we're trying to say.
Find somebody who will take it very seriously.
Exactly. And that's what churches must do. Now, here's the other thing that I mentioned, PA, New Jersey being mandatory child abuse reporters. Now, here's the other thing. For the victim, that leaves the victim empowered because now that you reported it to the church, now the church is held responsible for having to report it. If they do not, then they are held liable. Now, I'm speaking only for Pennsylvania. I'm not sure what it is for New Jersey, but penalties for failing to report or to file a report ranges from a misdemeanor to a felony, both to the second degree. So it could be anywhere either 1 to 2 years in prison and a fine of up to $5,000, or 5 to 10 years in prison and a fine of up to $25,000. Now, again, if what you're experiencing is domestic abuse, here's the telephone number for the National Domestic Violence. And Alyssa, if you can also slap it in the notes too.
Yep, I will.
Yep, 1-800-799-SAFE. Again, that's 1-800-799-SAFE. And here's the other thing. If you don't feel comfortable talking about it, there is also a chat function enabled. So you can chat with someone right away. You also have the suicide hotline. And the new 3-digit code for that is 988. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, call that number. Don't question if you are. And here's the thing. Once you do escape, and I mentioned this at the beginning, give yourself space and grace to heal. I mean, any sort of violation of trust feels traumatic. And the interesting thing is that the people who you would expect to trust are the biggest fucking liars out there. And the people you expect who wouldn't believe you are your biggest advocates. It's very counterintuitive. And
it is.
It's one of the most bittersweet realities I've come to experience that non-Christians do far better with dealing with the ramifications of abuse than Christians do, which should not.
It's very sad.
It is. And
very sad.
Here's the thing. If there were reputable data that had evidence upon evidence upon evidence to the contrary, I will eat my words and own up to it, but I've yet to see it. And
right.
Pretty sure yeah. Now, again, here's the other thing. Once you do escape, be prepared to lose relationships. I mean, that's part of the trauma too. You may have developed some strong friendships. I have. And having to leave that after coming forward because of self-preservation while the church is decaying and imploding from within, it's traumatic. It's devastating. It's depressing.
Yeah, it certainly is.
So in a sense, I say with caution, prepare to feel alone. So do what you must, get counseling, start on medication.
And know that ultimately, like, you will find people who stand by your side.
Yes, find community. Yes, and that's the other thing.
Such great advice.
It is. Take care of yourself and thank you. And if applicable, take care of others within your family who are abused.
Yes.
Especially if the abuse happened to a minor within someone you know. Now, again, there's no prescriptive way or any straightforward or linear way of saying, here's how you handle. There's no 12-step program. And you affirm this as well. There's no clear-cut way as to how to deal with trauma because every human being is different. Every human being processes trauma differently. Every human being feels trauma differently. There may be certain triggers that may happen. There may be some overlap. That's up to you as far as how you want to move forward. Now, for the Christian, I also want to say, and this is, I'm kind of piggybacking off of Beth Moore's advice after her defecting from the Southern Baptist Convention. Sidebar, you go, girlfriend. Embrace your wilderness wandering. Realize and rejoice with mingled tears, sorrow, and grief that you serve and you are loved by the Son of God, who himself became a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Yes, we do feel alone. I'm not trying to minimize what I say next, but the good news is that because of what Jesus did at the cross, we'll never have to feel that alone ever again.
Yeah, that's great advice.
And if I could just shake somebody up, kick them in the nards, do whatever it takes to make them believe it, I would. And I realize that's going to take time. Now, if you're someone who's advocating for someone, give them space as well. Don't be like Job's friends and offer trite Christian cliches. That may be well true and everything like that, but in the moment, trauma is still trauma. Give them space, give them a place, give them grace.
Absolutely.
Be very, very patient with them. Yes, I realize that you're going to have to associate with someone who has experienced trauma. Yes, I realize that there may be some that you may be feeling a little bit outcast. Well, guess what? Get over it. Jesus did, and so can you. And he can help you to be a faithful friend. He can help you to be a person who can be a sounding board. He can help you be a good friend to speak a faithful word at an appropriate time. He can also help you just to say, listen, I'm going to apply Galatians 6:2, not to get some brownie points with God, but because his love has set me free to bear your burdens. And I see your burdens as being heavy. I hear the choking up and the fear, and I'm going to do what I can to come alongside you, no matter what it takes. And if if Christians within churches can begin to do that without having to address any sort of bullshit nuance or anything like that, then maybe, perhaps, we can reclaim some credibility that, yes, we do stand for those who are marginalized, and we do stand for justice, in the sense that we will do whatever it takes to make sure that those who are truly victims do feel safe.
Thank you. Such incredible advice, such an important story. And I'm sure that was not easy for you. So thank you so much for coming on the show and for just being vulnerable and for empowering others to kind of take their healing into their own hands. I appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks, Alyssa.
Thanks for listening, everyone. For more information, please head over to lightaftertrauma.com, or you can also follow us on social media. On Instagram, we are at lightaftertrauma, and on Twitter, it is at lightafterpod. Lastly, please head over to patreon.com/lightaftertrauma to support our show. We are asking for $5 a month, which is the equivalent to a cup of coffee at Starbucks. So please head on over again. That's patreon.com/lightaftertrauma. Thank you, and we appreciate your support.